Good afternoon. This is Joan Miles, moderator of the last segment of Paul's show, Community Service, from 10 to 1 on Friday. My segment from 12:30 to 1 is called What Matters. Today our guest is holistic chiropractor Dan Schultz of Maitreya Healing Center at 5th and H Street and developer of Maitreya Mountain Village off the grid. Dan is here to shed some light on how this country is actually governed. In a word, he says we are an oligarchy. Paul and I actually disagree on our politics, as he often points out. I'm conservative. We must conserve our freedoms. He says he is left of socialism. I believe socialism has never worked.
I'm anti-socialism.
It kills the spirit of the individual. Liberal big government is rife with waste, fraud, and abuse. I'm against liberal universities, liberal news media, liberal Hollywood elites, crooked Hillary supporters. As I recall, Hillary said during the debates that we should accept a president duly elected by the people. Of course, that was when she expected to win the election. Anyway, Dan Schultz is here today to talk about a different form of government, oligarchy. According to the dictionary, an oligarchy is a type of government in which power is concentrated in the hands of only a few people. Aristocracy, rule of the elite, is a type of oligarchy. And his form of oligarchy he calls technocracy. It makes the rest of us seem naive when we learn that forces behind the scenes are really controlling things. Paul?
Thank you, Joan. And Dan, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm feeling good.
Hey, look, all the mics are working. That makes me happy.
All right.
So were you prepared for the technocracy talk? You're good at that. You can come in and sit down and just go with
technocracy.
Sure. Yeah. And we were talking before about, just to sort of get into it and back into, about Maitreya and what's happening up the hill and the good things going. How's the permaculture?
It's good. We are completely sustainable. We have a fine dairy herd of of milkers. Yeah, we've got 5 milking goats and chickens and gardens, and our orchards are coming into maturity. So we're abundant with food and human resources too.
Oh, wonderful! That's good. That's good to hear. It's an enchanting place you have up there. It's a lot of fun to visit. And I have to tell you though, I couldn't stay in the treehouse. That was a little too tall.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. It's up there.
So technocracy. There was a video that you provided, Joan, a while back to sort of get the juices flowing, and I started watching it. Actually, I lost it for a long time, and then found it, and then started watching it, and it was scary. I guess we'll get into that. Is that a good entree into the idea of technocracy with the big oil video and how it's sort of, I don't know, colored?
Yeah, I think it is. James Corbett, one of my favorite alternative news sources, he put together a documentary called Why Big Oil Conquered the World. And the reason why I like it is he references he gives great history. He documents. It's not someone's opinion or conjecture, and he doesn't make leaps of faith. He really is a documenter and a researcher, and he shows that from the beginning, these elite people have a plan. And their plan's not so rosy. It starts with in the documentary with eugenics. And eugenics, if you don't know what that is, it's cultivating and controlling the gene pool, which means sometimes eliminating certain types of people. And it's happened throughout history. And these elites, these people in Harvard and Yale, really have eugenics agendas, and he documents that well. And then the documentary goes into climate change, man-made climate change agenda, which I'm so glad, because I really feel like so many people have been snowed by that. It's so easy just to kind of not research that thoroughly. You hear that 97% of the scientists believe in climate change. And, when you really look at the science, climate change is a political agenda. And it's a political agenda promoted by the elites, these oligarchy, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the people that control things in the world, the banksters. And And it's headed towards more control of resources, more control of our lives through carbon taxes and cap and trade and those kind of things. And then the documentary goes into what technocracy is. I guess that's our subject for today. But technocracy is interesting because we all see it, we all feel it happening, and we see it happening in front of us.
How so? What are the day-to-day, like, what's the tell? What do you feel?
Well, you try to go take $600 out of your bank account on an ATM in the weekend. You can't do it. The cell phone's a good example. This, technocracy is not a political system; it's an economic system of control. So, I verified this a few years ago. I was just curious about how many people were afraid of the government. So I emailed 20 of my friends, and I said, I in my email I put terrorist, bomb. And I said, this is a meaningless words I just put on this email, but I'm curious about how many of you will forward this to anyone else.
Sure.
Half
Anybody?
of them were mad at me.
Yeah. You got me on a list somewhere, right? You got me on a watch list at the NSA.
I'll send it to you later on today. Yeah.
And that. Attention, K-Funk.
Half of them were really mad at me. Don't send me this kind of stuff. They're afraid of being on some fusion center, FBI list.
Yeah.
Just for having those words. We all know that we're being surveilled, we're being watched through our cell phones. I mean, through our TVs. Samsung TVs have surveillance. There are so many ways when you really dig deep into the rabbit hole that we're being surveilled. Most people now. This is not like some conspiracy theory that people think, oh, the government. We know that this is happening.
Yeah, it's common for just regular people to put a piece of tape over their webcam on their laptop. Yeah.
Even who was it? Not Steve Jobs, but
it was somebody big who did. Zuckerberg.
Zuckerberg. Yeah. Who puts the tape over his computer, and Bill Gates. I think it's Bill Gates' kids. He recommended that they put a piece of tape over. So this is pervasive throughout our culture, and also the police state. We know that there are FEMA camps everywhere. We know that the police are becoming more militarized, and police are. What was that? Just a few weeks ago, we had the gal who called the police because there were disturbance, and they shot her. Police are getting nervous, and the police brutality is on the rise, and they're being militarized. So, and prison for profit is a good example.
Yep.
They're lobbying Congress, and they're putting more people in prison than ever before. And we already have 25% of the world's prisoners with 5% of the world's population. We are like a prison country, and so that's disturbing. Technocracy is a system, and we were just talking before the show about AI. AI is this new application where they have algorithms in Google, and they're manipulating the information that we get. They're manipulating the information we have access to with these algorithms. We saw it during the Trump and Hillary election in 2016. That this was disturbing. They blatantly had not only things like election fraud with the George Soros computerized voting machines, where what was the university? Not Columbia. I think it was Northwestern University. Did a study, and they showed that if you use the computerized voting machines, the results were 10% more in favor of Hillary than the exit polls.
Wow.
So we know that voter and election fraud happened, but this Internet of Things and the smart meters. Not everybody, especially in Delaware County, knows smart meters, but we probably know of them. And we know smart streets. We know that if we run a red light, that there's probably a camera that will send us a ticket.
Yeah, like dueprocess.com, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So is it just a matter? What you describe, control has always been an issue in civilization. Somebody wants to control somebody else. With technocracy, is it just a matter of scale? How deeply into your life that the powers that be can now worm their way through technocracy? I mean, what's the difference between technocracy and a stockade? I mean,
that's a great question, and I think the real difference is that technocracy is we have try to complain about not being able to take $600 out of your bank account. Who do you go to? The bank manager? They'll say it's just policy.
Yep.
When there's driverless cars or any of these other laws that we enact. I mean, the assault on the Constitution is one of those, we're boiling frogs. We're sitting in a pot of water and it's slowly heating. And, before it's too late, one of the most, I think it was last year, the most popular reorder of books was George Orwell's 1984.
Wow.
People are reading that like never before because they're identifying with it. This big brother surveillance state. But with technocracy, with fascism, people came to your house. There was a boot in the face. It was the Orwellian boot in the face.
Yeah, that famous image. Yeah.
And people who talk about this in these circles say that what's coming is not Orwell's boot in the face. They're talking that it's the Brave New World, that we're getting people to accept their enslavement. People aren't all up in arms about the Constitution being eroded. We just have C-16, and boy, I used to dislike. Honestly, I'm not on the right or left. I used to dislike the right and left equally. But now it seems like the left has been co-opted and in certain ways. And we have C-16 in Canada, where if you use the wrong pronoun for a transgender person, you can be investigated and go to jail and fined.
Wow.
Using the wrong pronoun for a transgender person.
I have not heard about this. Wow.
It is in law. If you question climate change in Canada, you can be investigated by the government.
Wow.
It is codified in law. These things are really clearly First Amendment rights of freedom of speech. And they're discriminatory. I can use the wrong pronoun for you, but not a transgender person. These are just wrong.
Good point. Yeah.
This is social engineering. And, I think it's a part of the technocracy. I think it's a part of the divide and conquer. And when you look at the big picture of what's really going on in the geopolitical chessboard, they're messing with us.
Messing? How do you mean? It makes it sound almost playful when you say it that way. Messing with us.
Well, they're manipulating us. I think, even the term political correctness came from the Soviet Union. It was a term that they invented to control the population. We know this from declassified documents. We know it from declassified documents that the CIA, you can look it up on Wikipedia, this is not conspiracy theory, they had a program called Project Gladio. And Project Gladio had to have been trillions of dollars to create dissent, discord, and distraction all over the world, largely in Europe and in Asia, but also in this country. Part of that project was to even promote and support things like the women's liberation movement.
So from when? I've never heard of Project Gladio.
You can look it up on Wikipedia. I think Project Gladio started in the 50s and went through the 70s. It was around the same time, which is really an important point, of Project Mockingbird. Have you heard of that?
I have heard of that, yes.
Yeah. You can look that up and you can actually see the congressional hearings. Project Mockingbird was, Congress found out that the CIA had implants in all of the major media outlets in the country. And they were paying, they had certain reporters on the CIA payroll. They paid them to run certain stories and not to run others. And they had an agenda. And it was oftentimes the agenda of fear and of division.
Not with specific content, but just basically to keep people divided and afraid.
I think so. When you look at the scope of what Project Mockingbird did, and people to this day, I mean, what came out in WikiLeaks and all of these WikiLeaks dumps, including the last one with the the CIA, WikiLeaks in its 11-year period has never proven to be wrong. They've never had any, this email was false. And WikiLeaks is a valuable resource for us. It really tells us what our government's doing.
Yeah. I think it should enjoy some sort of special status, I think, in the world. Is just being like a supra-governmental sort of thing, kind of an ombudsman person for.
Yeah, exactly. And, and it's exposed even the media's role in this disinformation program. Even just the fakeness, this whole meme right now that's going on throughout the country. Everybody knows what fake news is. And some people think fake news is the alternative media. In the alternative media, we believe that all MSM, mainstream media, is fake news or disinformation or half-truths. And what's your experience with this, Jamie?
Am I hot over here?
I think you are.
Let's see. Say something.
Hello.
No, barely.
You
Do it again.
Okay, one more.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Yeah, Jamie's in the house.
Yeah, I'm in the house. I agree with you. There's a saying: if you can't dazzle them with facts, you baffle them with bullpucky. And I do believe that back in the days of the economic collapse, our Treasury Secretary was Timothy Geithner. And in an interview once, he was asked about a particular political situation, and he dismissed it as political theater. And that term resounded with me to this day, in the fact that if you take a look at the media and the way it portrays a lot of political situations day after day after day after day, program after program, news channel, it doesn't matter which one, they all have the same story. It's like they're reading from a script. And I do believe that there is a lot of disinformation out there. We talked about this last week when I brought up the old TV movie Network with Albert Finney, and I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And in the diatribe about how the news didn't really matter. It was all about ratings. And all about ratings was all about the people who pay for those ratings, which brings it all back to money.
Yeah.
I think what I find interesting too is we're so angry right now at Russia for doing what we've been doing for quite some time, basically since World War II, since we got the capability to do this sort of thing, and doing to us what our own media does to us on a daily basis, just seeding us with disinformation, pitting us against each other, and creating these huge divides because they're dramatic and people will watch them, and if people are watching, then you can sell ad space for it.
I'm about to go offshore for 30 days, and when you
what's that euphemism for? What are you doing?
Offshore. Yeah, I'm going
like underground.
Yeah, I'm going to Thailand.
Offline.
Oh, nice.
But as I go offshore outside the continental United States, it's kind of like going outside of Delaware County. People they live in little bubbles. If you go outside of the United States, you find out the rest of the world doesn't have the fixation on the news topics that we have. Europe has a whole different vein in which they speak. They'll sit at their coffee shops and they'll talk politics all day long, and to them that's normal. But their politics is 5,000 years old, as it is in China or Japan. If you go to the South Pacific, notwithstanding the unrest that's down there, you'll find a lot of people don't care. They live in a bubble that is described mostly by the sun coming up, the sun going down. Does it rain, or do I have enough fish to eat?
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point about the Russian narrative. Not only is there very little, really no valid proof that Russia interfered with our elections. I've seen none, anyways. But even
all the online things that are supposedly published by
RT.
What's RT?
Russian Today.
Oh, Russia.
Their media outlet.
Oh, just that there were so many fake profiles all over all the different social media, and they would publish specifically divisive sort of memes and articles and stories and things like that.
Trolls.
Yeah, just to get people angry at each other in the United States to foster a cultural divide.
Maybe. One of the things that came out in the Vault 8 WikiLeaks was that the CIA has the ability to produce, in quotation marks, evidence that implicates other people. They can change IP addresses.
Okay,
and they have that hacking technological ability. But you make the best point, really. We have been interfering, and we installed Pinochet in China. We overthrow
in Chile.
In Chile, yeah, I'm sorry.
We installed them in China too. Wow.
Well, maybe.
Family.
Chile. Yeah, thank you.
Family.
We overthrow democratically elected leaders and install our dictator puppets. It happened in Iran with the Shah and all over the country. I mean, not only do we interfere with actual elections, but we do awful, horrendous things. It's like a really black pot calling the kettle black to be all upset that Russia might have interfered with our elections. But it goes so much deeper. And when we look at what's happening with China, you have a country that is beyond socialism, that is really beyond communism, a totalitarian state that has killed at least 50 or 60 million of its own population, and they are given right now the reins increasingly to Hollywood. And you look at Hollywood films that are increasingly pro-China. China's interfering in our politics in many ways. They're making recommendations, and Google and Facebook are going to China and working with China to censor their internet. I just heard a podcast just a couple of days ago that Zuckerberg praised China's internet model of censorship and is actively promoting that type of control. Alphabet, the Google parent company Alphabet CEO was there and also spoke, and it was really scary to hear them in China praising China on that side, pushing a totalitarian censorship agenda. And I think this is a part of technocracy. It's the control of information, it's the control of resources, it's the control of people.
Okay, so what then? Okay, I'm an oligarch. I'm sitting around, in my the turret at the top of my mansion, and I'm twirling my mustache, and I'm trying to figure out what to do. And I've got this long history of from eugenics in the 19th century all the way through World War II, when you had to change the name, that kind of morphs into conservation in the latter part of the 19th century, and then into a more investment in that conservation to sort of further power and to spread. Why am I doing it? What am I after as an oligarch and trying to control the world?
It's a great question, and I think this is one of the reasons why. Well, first of all, we used to have a king. We knew exactly who was controlling us. It was the king. He was the oppressor. And we had somebody to point our finger at. If you go to Forbes right now and you see the richest 500 people in the country, are the Rothschilds on that? The Rothschilds have unimaginable, essentially they have infinite wealth because they control the Federal Reserve, along with the Rockefellers. They not only have trillions, they put Bezos as the richest man in the world at $500 billion or something of that nature. The Rothschilds and Rockefellers have just unimaginable trillions. Some of their mansions are tens of billions of dollars, and they've donated them to trusts. But so not only do we not know who it is, but I don't think we can understand their mentality. They say that power. What's that term?
Absolute power corrupts.
Absolute power corrupts. They have absolute power, essentially.
I'm just trying to if it's about control, if it's about using technocracy as the newest, most pervasive form of control, what is it ultimately you're trying to control? You've already got all the money. You've already got all the power. What do you want? What do you want? Cell phone?
Why I think we can't really get it, and of course we can't really know. We can only put the pieces of the puzzle together. We can only try to figure it out. We can't go ask Lord Rothschild.
No. We can just construct a narrative, basically.
We can't go. You can't get in on their board meetings, and they do have telling. They make statements. The mother of what was it? One of the women in the Rothschild family had a famous quote: "If none of my sons wanted wars, there would be no wars."
Wow.
And one of their other quotes was, "I care not who makes the laws. Give me the control of the money supply, and I care not who makes the laws." I think that very likely either they have an attitude, a disposition, a belief in the divine right of kings, that they are somehow divinely ordained to rule, which very well may be the case, or they somehow transition into sociopathy. I mean, I really do believe this, or I strongly suspect it, that the sociopaths of the world, especially the brilliant ones, Cheney, they gravitate towards these, these are people like
aren't you talking about reptiles now?
Reptilians, maybe, and some people propose
let's bring in some David Icke here, round out the...
or maybe that's a metaphor that the reptilian brain, really has very little compassion. It's a control, kind of evil thing.
Interesting.
But
wow.
Whether it's true that they're reptilians, or they're just reptilian brain has taken hold, or they're sociopaths, or they have this absolute power and this absolute corruption.
See, is it that simple? Is it just a neurosis?
Or
maybe.
Is it that they do it because they can?
Or maybe
Simple
because
as
they
that.
can.
Opportunism.
I mean, maybe
Sure.
when you're Lord of the universe and you have this control.
You do Lord of the Universe things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You say, let's see, what can we do? Let's weed out the sick and the feeble, and let's do some eugenics.
Yeah.
Or maybe they just really want, like they don't have absolute control.
And see, and you're not taught this in school, but this was something, and I knew this from before. I've read this and watching this video, the big oil video in Technocracy, that we sterilized tens of thousands of people in the early 20th century in the United States, and I had no idea. And I had no idea also about specific eugenics laws written for like Virginia, then becoming the groundwork for Germany's eugenics laws. Actual laws that were copied in Germany in the 20s and then made into law in the 30s and made into policy by the 40s. And it's just so scary to me. And you're not ever taught this bigger picture. I want there to be a plan. I want there to be a 007 bad guy somewhere with a plan that he's gonna these executables here. And then world domination, and then he can be stopped. Yeah. But if it's just this sort of free-form neurosis of a minute class of humans, then what do you do then? We've got 10 minutes left before we have to get out of the way. Faced with technocracy, faced with the increasing control of everyday life and everything from, they're talking about making me pay to go ride my bike out by Lake Earl, to my girlfriend getting a ticket from Medford mailed to her with a picture of her license plate saying you were going too fast with the flow of traffic. And who do you argue with about that? Not being able to get to your own money, not being able to deal with the real impediments that you face in this burgeoning technocracy. How do you get out of that? How do you stop that? Can you step out of that flow? I know you live in the mountains, off the grid. That's one way to sort of move away from that, correct?
Not everybody can do that, though.
Not everybody can do that, and you still have to pay property taxes.
Sure, yeah.
So what can we do faced with all of this?
That's the best question. When you really get to understanding what is going on, this technocracy, this Internet of Things, these smart homes, these smart everything. They're talking about chipping people. In Sweden, they're doing it.
Wow.
People are lining up by the thousands to get chipped. And what the answer is, what do you do? Or the question is, what do you do? The answer, I believe so strongly, is we have this conversation. We share, right now we still have a relatively free internet. It is censored, sure, but we can still share information. And we don't know how much longer this is going to last.
That's true, yeah.
We really don't know how much longer we have this free internet. While we have it, documentaries like Why Big Oil Conquered the World. It's produced by James Corbett, CorbettReport.com. Everybody can see it. It's got millions of views. Watch that and share it. What I've been doing lately, just because I think it's such an important conversation, is I copy it on a thumb drive. And all my patients that come in, if they're interested in this kind of thing, and they have the attention span or the interest to watch a documentary, not everybody's into them, I give them a thumb drive. And I say, here, take it. This is important. And then once we start all, having this conversation, knowing this, maybe we get involved locally. The Agenda 21 agenda.
You said it.
Is implemented on a local level through NGOs and the county. Oftentimes it's government or federally funded. They'll come in and say, hey, we'll give you $500,000 if you put these smart meters by all your smart streets on every street corner. We can show up at these meetings locally, be involved once we're aware, and say, hey, we don't want smart streets.
So the answer then, this is great, because as information is going to be every day more and more controlled, information flow, access to information, and of course I remember back in the 90s before the internet came up, it was this incredible new world of freedom and information, and we're all going to be sharing this utopian sort of thing on the internet, and I thought, well, no, it's going to end up having a lot of ads. It's not going to be like that. And your answer seems to be talk to people, old-fashioned human communication, actually talking to people and giving them access by handing them a thumb drive or a DVD, giving them access to information that will spark something in them.
Yeah, I'd like to put in a little 2 cents here for my arch hero V, as in V for Vendetta. And in the movie, at the end of the movie, actually he had a diatribe in the beginning, and he basically said, I'd like to take you aside right now and have a little chat about what's going on, and it's all kind of going sideways, and we want to find out what we're going to do about it. But first of all, most of you are probably asking, how did it happen? And he says, the way is the person irresponsible, you need only look into the mirror. The people are responsible. And at the end of the movie, they en masse surrounded the government that was oppressing them, and the people, they did the same thing with Ferdinand Marcos in the Philippines. When the people got fed up, they surrounded his compound, they wouldn't let him out, and they said, along with people like John Galt from Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, they simply said, we're not going to do anything until something changes the way we want it changed. Democracy is a fatal philosophical idea because it is dependent on mob mentality, 51%. However, when it comes down to it, if you have the strength of numbers, you get your way. The one with the gold makes the rules. If you have most of the gold, you're the guy. The reason China is out there and being extolled by people like Zuckerberg is because it's another teat, and he wants that money. It's all about the money.
Sure, but as we are divided in order to be conquered more and more, and faced with more of a global economy and global information networks, how do you get those numbers? How do you come up with enough people to stand around the metaphorical palace?
You come to KFUG.
Yeah,
KFUG is the answer.
Absolutely. It's the tide that lifts.
We have no corporate sponsors. That's true. That's right.
Well, some people say that there is. I like to put this in historical perspective. If you look at something called the Tytler cycle, historian named Tytler looked at all civilizations, and he found they all went through a cycle. They went from great spiritual strength to abundance, and abundance to decadence, and decadence to apathy, apathy to dependence, dependence to oppression, and oppression to great spiritual strength.
Oh, wow.
So where are we at in that cycle?
Yeah.
Somewhere between apathy, dependence, bleeding into oppression. And so, some people say, maybe it's the New Agers, or maybe it's the Christians, that where there's an awakening happening. That this is the age of Aquarius, which is supposed to be a 500 to 1,000 years of light, of awakening. Some people say that this is happening, and maybe we can avert this cycle. Otherwise, if we repeat history, we are going to oppression.
The trouble I see with that is that in order to sort of unplug from all of that, to subvert the dominant paradigm, as this paradigm has become more powerful and more a part of our daily lives, and we've become more dependent on it, that's going to be a painful process for many people.
Yeah.
Not everybody can go into their hobbit house. Not everybody can go out and cut wood. It's going to be an ugly, painful, worldwide process.
I suspect you're right. And just as, the more that we can become aware, the more that we can have the conversation, the more that we can raise the collective consciousness through KFUG, through thumb drives, through conversations at the laundromat, the quicker we can all wake up from this.
That's true. Good point. Thank you. Wonderful point to end on. Anything else you'd like to add? I mean, it's tough to beat that line.
Let's end it with
that. Joan, do you have any outro you'd like to do?
Just want to go out with Whitney Houston. The greatest love of all is to love yourself, and all of that good things will flow from that.
Aho.